Thank you again, everybody, for being here in this first strategic planning meeting. I didn't know what else to call this, but it's really intended to just be a meeting for us to get together, get the authors together at EdTech Books and other people that are using it, to give you updates on what's going on with the platform, where we're headed, but also, even more importantly from my perspective, is to get feedback from you and guidance from you and trying to figure out how to continue to move our efforts forward in ways that are beneficial to people. So my slides here you can access by going to bit.ly/edtechbooks.2021 if you would like. I'll also put that in the chat box, but also just feel free to watch on your screen. So my goal today is just to kind of address these three questions. So where are we now? Where do we want to go next, and how do we get there? So I'm going to be talking quite a bit here at the beginning about where are we now, but then I really want to just have a conversation after that about what might be our collective vision for what we want to do next, or what features, what futures do we want for these kinds of efforts that we're engaged in together, and then maybe practically talking about what we need to do to get there. Great, well, welcome, Michelle. Okay, so again, we have so many great authors here, so many great things happening on EdTech Books. Thank you all for all that you're doing. There are just thousands and thousands of hours that people are putting into creating good content for colleagues and students. And it's been amazing to me just how this has taken off and how so many people have contributed so much of their time and expertise to make this happen. So it's getting started. Brief history, current status, and future plans. So this is where I'm going to just dump a lot of information on you very quickly, just so that you can understand maybe where we came from and where we are right now. So some of the guiding principles and values that have driven me to when I first started creating this platform was this idea that we need better ways of organizing ourselves around doing what's right in education. And so we actually just had a forum here recently, just last week, with Reverend Dr. William J. Barber. One of the things that he said was, we don't have a scarcity of resources in the world. What we have is a scarcity of collective moral conscience. And his big efforts are related to poverty. But I long had similar kind of feelings about our education space and how we have so many resources and expertise available to us that we aren't making as full use of as we could. And I couple that with this comment that David Wiley made a while back in a TED talk that he gave, that the only legitimate role for new media and technology in education is to increase our capacity to be generous with one another. The more open we are, the better education will be. And I put those two things together and think, wow, you know what? If we think about the benefits of EdTech for education, it seems to me like maybe the most important role that EdTech can play is allowing us to be more generous with one another and to act morally and ethically with one another. And so I put a picture here of an example of a giving machine just as an illustration of this. So I don't know if you've seen these, but they're in a lot of big cities like Salt Lake City and New York City. The idea behind this is that the assumption is that people are generous. They want to give, they want to share, but they often don't know how, or they often don't have opportunities to do it. And so like with a giving machine, I can just walk up to this on my way to lunch and I can buy a goat for a family on the other side of the world, or I can buy shoes or a polio vaccine. And the idea here is that I think this is a similar assumption that I make with EdTech Books, is that I think that most educators want to give, they want to share, but they often lack structures that help them to do that in a meaningful and easy way. And our systems aren't designed to incentivize or value giving either. You think about things like tenure and promotion, they're not really designed for that. So can we use educational technologies as kind of this go-between to make giving easier and to lead to more generous futures that play upon or act upon our good intentions as people? So the history of this is I started right after I went through third year review, really thinking deeply about the open textbook that I was using with my undergrads, and thinking if there might be a better way of doing it. Rick West reached out to me because he was doing an open textbook as well for his graduate students. We were both using WordPress, but weren't very happy with what we were with the platform. We wanted like a central place where we could link to all the resources that we were creating and that other people in the field were creating. So initially we just started to create this simple HTML jumping off point where we could link all these books together. But because we were so unhappy with WordPress, I started playing with creating my own system, and Rick helped me to figure out what that might look like. And so just over time, that evolved into creating our own system from the ground up, and I'll explain the technology behind it in a second. To 3 years later, now we have EdTech books, and we have people joining daily, creating content, and it's really exciting. So currently, we have about 65 books that are published, and about twice that many that are being written currently. That includes almost 3,000 chapters that are published by. A lot of these are peer-reviewed, so a lot of the books go through peer review processes on their own, where the editor or the chief author engages in a peer review process that they have created, similar to a traditional publishing model. So we have over 300 book authors. These are all indexed on Google Scholar. They're all search engine optimized. They're highly accessible. So students with disabilities, for instance, can use them very easily. They can also easily be copied and reused in different settings, which really supports the 5 C's of OER and the adaptability of using these in different contexts. And they're beginning increasingly keyword indexed. That's something that we're working on right now to make better. Since we started with textbooks, but we've now also branched off into journals. So the Journal of Applied Instructional Design is our flagship in this regard. We now have 6 complete issues of this journal that is now publicly and freely published through our platform. We have over 60 peer-reviewed articles that have been published. These, again, are Google Scholar Index, search engine optimized, and highly accessible. And then we also have some conference proceedings moving to the platform as well. So the Castle Conference, which is a teacher education conference held annually, did their proceedings in it last year. We do have the theory competition with AACT that is moving to the platform as well. And we're in talks with some other folks to move some of their conference proceedings over. One of the requests that I've gotten over and over again is that we have a lot of people interested in using the platform who are not quote unquote ed tech people. So I was just talking with Bob beforehand. Bob is not, I don't think you call yourself an ed tech person, but we have a lot of people wanting to do work, do open work, so the ed tech books kind of moniker doesn't necessarily work for everybody. So I've designed the platform so that it can be installed across multiple domains. And so we have a couple of other domains active right now that are using the same source code, but just allows for slightly different branding. So we have equitypress.org, which is currently up. We also have individual institutions that can use it. So BYU's Open Textbook Network is using this. BYU Idaho has something similar. And I've been in some conversations with folks at other universities that want to create their own kind of portals where they have their own custom installation of it. The org chart for the platform is pretty minimal. So here, I'm a faculty member at BYU. I do this as my citizenship work. It's also obviously connected to my teaching and my research. I have a couple of students that work with me. Like Julie Irvine is a copy editor that's been working with me for the past couple of years. She's done a great job. I'm actually losing her this month, which is very sad. But I have some students coming in and helping me over time, primarily around working with authors on copy editing things or helping us build resources to support authors. But the most of the work is done by the book authors themselves. So I consult a lot with the book authors, who then consult with their chapter authors if it's an edited volume. That's how the connections are made in that regard. On our end, or on my end, we tend to focus on platform development, hosting, accessibility, and optimization. So I'll do some editing on the work, on the books that are published, but that's mainly to improve accessibility. Like, we're not doing like censoring or moderation or anything like that on the content. We really are trying to just create a platform that empowers people to be able to do that with the things that they want to create. And then tech support and troubleshooting, and we do all that for free. In terms of outreach or impact, this last year, we had over 500,000 unique users using the site. And so this was over 1.5 million page views on across all the books. But that is actually a low number. Like, the actual impact is much higher than that, because we also provide all the books and all the chapters by default as PDFs. And those are a lot harder to track, but we know that we've had at least about 1 million PDF downloads in the past few years. So the actual numbers of people accessing the content is much higher than just that 1.5 million page views. And obviously this excludes email sharing of PDFs, printing, and those kinds of things. On the right here, you'll see some of the all-time most popular books. This is the actual order currently of the most popular books. You'll notice hybrid flexible course design is at the top. That one saw, and that one and a lot of these others saw a huge uptick when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, because we had a lot of people interested in online learning. And I mean, they're great books, but like we just saw a huge spike in a lot of the resources related to online learning, because you had all these K-12 schools and universities really needing supports. And so a lot of them came to the site that finding resources that they needed at the time. And Brian's being modest too, because his work is also pointed out in the Chronicle of Higher Education that helped to drive people to the site. And it's really, we just have a lot of really high quality work on the site. You'll also notice like the Journal of Applied Instructional Design is mentioned multiple times. That's because each issue is counted separately. So if they were all aggregated together, that would actually be higher on the list. About 2/3 of our users are accessing it from a desktop computer or laptop. I think that's noteworthy because about 1/3 of our users are accessing content from their phones. And this is why how we design the site is very important, because especially if we're trying to reach underserved populations, we have to design with the mobile first mindset, which we do on EdTech books. So all the content is accessible on a mobile device. Normally when these resources are created, mobile is treated as an afterthought. We do it the other way. We design for mobile first. And that's why things are structured the way they are in the site. And I think that translates partly to why we have so much international traffic. So less than 1/3 of our traffic comes from within the United States. Philippines is the second highest user of our site, followed by India. You'll also notice that most of our traffic is organic, meaning it comes from search engines. So over here, the black box on the right, that's just from November, this last month. So we had over 70,000 users, and we had 66,000 clicks from Google searches. So, and we're also highly indexed on Google because it's for a lot of reasons. I actually get like 3 emails a day from people wanting to pay me to put their content on our site so that we will link to their websites, because that's how you get moved up the page rankings, is if highly respected sites are linking to your site. And so I think that's just a testament to the fact that even just in terms of search engine optimization and how our site is operating and being used by search engines, where we're being viewed as a very high quality site. Also, in terms of quality, one of the things we can do is track what universities are linking to it. So a lot of people who use this for these resources for formal learning will just embed the content into their learning management systems, for instance, or link to it. When they do that, whenever students come to the site, we can see where they're coming from. So we can track what universities are actually using our resources. And so this is just a short list of some of the ones that are using the resources the most. But the list is actually much longer than this. We also have quality assurance checks at the end of every chapter, which is something that you wouldn't get with a traditional publisher, where readers can rate the quality of each chapter. And across the entire site, after over 7,000 reviews, our content is generally treated as high quality. Receives a 4.1 out of 5 on that rating scale. We've started to receive some awards related to our work. I was recently awarded the Scholarly Advancement Teacher Education and Educational Technology Award at AECT. It wasn't explicitly said that was because of the work with EdTech books, but that was implied or heavily implied to me that that's where it came from. But then I also have listed here several other awards that authors have received with work related to work that they've been doing that either started in EdTech books or that eventually ended up in EdTech books. Like Rick West has 2 books here that received the Best Book Award at our professional conference. It was the first time that an open book had received those awards, as far as I understand. We also, Cecil Short received the Texas Tech University Libraries Open Access Award for his work on a book that he created. And then we had other award winners for articles that were written in Journal of Applied Instructional Design, or that came about as a result of work that was being done in the platform, as for instance with Janke Earnshaw Schmidt and Taufik's book on learner and user experience research. So did I cut someone off? Was someone going to say something? Okay, I'm almost done with my spiel. So just a little bit of context information. Some of the challenges that we've been facing is with our context is that we started with no name recognition or affiliations about 3 years ago. We have no marketing or advertising budget. So all this growth, all this stuff that we've been doing, has come about just really from word of mouth and people sharing resources. So it's all been very organic and not really driven like with a business model or business plan or marketing people telling us what to do. And I think it's also noteworthy that most of the content we provide are on fairly niche topics. So like we're not like OpenStax where we're targeting those entry-level college courses that everyone has to take. I mean, these are books on technology integration for K-12 teachers and feminism and digital media literacy. And I mean, it's not that there aren't lots of people that are interested in those topics, but they're in comparison to a lot of the other, I guess, open ed initiatives out there, we do focus on fairly niche topics. So I think most of our success has come from search engine optimization and the mobile first design that we've been implementing. At least, I mean, on our end, the usability and perceived production value of the resources that are coming out. So the greatest compliment that I hear whenever I show people the site is people will often say things like, well, these don't look like open books. And I mean, there's a lot, that makes me sad and happy at the same time, but it shows you kind of what we're trying to do and what space we're trying to fill in the open education world by providing a way for people to create really high quality and high production value resources at very low cost. But then, yeah, so much of I think that the growth that we've seen has been because of word of mouth, social media. We've done some conference presentations, but not a lot actually. Just a little bit of information for anyone who cares. The technology behind this runs on what's called the LAMP stack. So this is a Linux machine. It runs on a Linux server that uses Apache, MySQL, and PHP on the front end. It's developed in jQuery and Bootstrap. Bootstrap is created by the folks that created Twitter. So that's what the interface, so like why it looks the way that it does. As I mentioned before, this was created from the ground up. So it represents about at least, I haven't gone through and counted, I'm kind of guessing here, but it's at least 50,000 lines of original code. So it's been thousands of hours of software development work. We didn't start like with WordPress or anything like that. We started completely from scratch because it just gave us more freedom to do what we wanted to do. So it runs in the cloud. It runs on Amazon Web Services. We're currently running on what's called a T3 medium server, which is kind of the low medium end of servers that AWS provides. And that costs us about $35 a month. So it's pretty inexpensive for the service that we're providing. So providing 500,000 people access to these resources for $35 a month seems like a pretty good thing to me. Obviously, that cost increases with growth. Our biggest cost is bandwidth. So as more resources are downloaded, or as resources that take up more memory are downloaded, like PDFs, for instance, that drives up the cost more. And so we have to be thoughtful about how we approach bandwidth kinds of issues. So this cost goes up every month, but it's still something that's very reasonable for us to manage. But that cost obviously doesn't include a few things. One of the things it doesn't include is the PDF builder. Currently, that runs on a different machine that I just host here in my office. So basically, that machine builds the PDFs from the website and then uploads them back up. And the reason for that is it's really intensive for it to do that. So are hardware intensive. So like Rick's book, for instance, is over 1,000 pages. I'm sure Bob's book is over 1,000 pages. And a lot of these are big books. And so if you've ever opened like a PDF on your computer or tried to create a PDF, imagine doing that with one that's over 1,000 pages. So we have to have the server do that for us. And we have to do it every time you make an edit, so that the PDF is up to date. So that's why we have a separate machine doing that. And currently that's just a machine that's provided to me by the university. And so that's not an additional cost, but eventually we'll move that to an AWS server as well. This cost obviously also doesn't include personnel or costs to all the authors, an opportunity cost to authors who are doing this work and giving away their work when they could potentially have published through another platform or monetized it in some way. So I guess just to mention, like from the outset, I designed this so that it could be sustainable on a very, very low budget. And I think that and we're doing that. And so we don't have to worry about a grant running out or anything like that, because the current costs associated with it are really reasonable for our department to support or us to support in other ways, without, having to hit a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for a multi-million-dollar grant or anything like that. But that is something that we need to maybe continue to think through about how we want to move this into the future. With our current software architecture and kind of model here, it's sustainable and scalable quite a bit. So I think we can easily grow to maybe 5 times our current use of the site with our current architecture. But if overnight, we grew to 100 times, then that might be a problem. We'd have to figure out some things about how we could use multiple server stacks to provide this service to different parts of the world and so forth. But for the time being, we're in a really good place given our current use. And I don't know if those of you who were using the site over the summer, you may have noticed some downtime. I think around like June, maybe there were a couple of days where the site was down. That's because we just saw a lot of growth during that time, and we had to move up to a bigger server. And I didn't have a process in place for doing that very quickly and easily. Now we have that in place. So if, for instance, we start to get server issues again, if we double in size, then I can just basically flip a switch with AWS and it just moves to a bigger server. And it just costs us a little bit more to do that. So some focal points for moving forward. So the 4 values that I established at the beginning when I started doing this work was focusing on freedom, accessibility, usability, and quality. And so that shapes a lot of the decisions that we make. So my goals and the things that are most important to me are sustaining current use. You are all investing your time and resources into making great resources for students and other educators. And so I want to be sure that we are sustaining that use and allowing those resources to grow as they can and as they should. But we also want to continuously improve the platform. So we do a lot of constant iteration work, where we do A/B testing, where we do like interface testing and UX types of things to make sure that the experience for users and authors is as good as it could be. I do want us to focus a bit more moving forward on trying to help authors to think through building a culture of continuous improvement. So we have some authors that are great about this. They are constantly updating their resources. But a lot of us come from a traditional mindset where I publish something and then I'm done with it. I wash my hands of it and walk away. And that can be fine, but it ends up not providing the best experience for our students and other educators, because once my tech integration book becomes 5 years old and I haven't made any updates to it, then maybe it's not as useful for people anymore. So helping to figure out ways of making continuous improvement kind of expected and supported is something that I think we need to continue to focus on with the platform, just so that we can better encourage a community of generosity and sharing and openness. For me, in terms of like my own research interests, the main research kind of problem that I'm trying to solve with this through these efforts is how to legitimize OER authorship as a scholarly endeavor. And my main reason for that is the main barrier preventing most faculty from doing this kind of work is that it's not valued by their institutions, or it's not perceived as being valuable to their institutions as part of tenure and promotion. And so I don't know the way to solve that, but I do think that there might be some paths forward in being able to better articulate impacts of this work. Because now if I'm going up for tenure and promotion, if I have a lot of really solid data about the impacts that the OER work I am doing has on the world, then I think that can help to support maybe more institutional shifts in thinking about what is legitimate scholarly work and what is actually having value on the world. So we wanted to continue to do more in terms of helping scholars to track impact and provide dashboards to support that and so forth. So a couple of specific future efforts that we're working on. We're continuing to do micro improvements all over the site. I have a list that I'm constantly working on of just bugs people tell me about or little things that we want to adjust. One of the big things that we just added is standards alignment. So now you have the ability in any chapter you create to flag it to according to specific standards. So you can go to the ISTE teacher standards and say this meets this ISTE teacher standard. And then that will allow us to provide navigation for people who want to find any resources that address that standard. It'll take them to your resource. So we have that up there for ISTE right now, and AECT. We'll be adding some more in the future. And if you have requests for specific standards that you would like for us to include, we can do that fairly easily. We just need like a CSV of those standards, which either you can provide or we can figure out on our end. Want to continue to revamp the impact dashboards. as I mentioned before, to help legitimize this work, to like tenure promotion committees, continue to improve navigation. Epub conversion has been something that's been requested a few times. We've tried to do it a couple times, and we've got it more or less working, but it's still very much an alpha version. It's a tricky one because I think a lot of people initially want EPUBs, but then once they start using the HTML and PDF versions that we have, they forget that they wanted EPUBs because the HTML tends to work better than an EPUB most of the time. But that is still something that's on our radar that we want to add in the future. There are a variety of other things I'm not going to dig into too much, other than we are publishing some maybe works that are in the public domain. So like we have like some John Dewey stuff. We've also been talking with, like Rachel Wadham is here. She's been talking with some folks about working with librarians at other universities who have orphan works that, which are works that either you can't find the copyright holder for, or the copyright holder has no interest in ever publishing them again, where we might be able to publish those on our site. That might be of interest to the larger community. And we're going to continue to do a variety of things related to indexing and integration with other platforms. So some of the challenges, and so this is my last slide, and then we'll start chatting. Yeah, EdTech Magazine would be an example of that, Rick. So if we wanted to make that, provide that online, that would be something I'd love for us to explore. I mean, with EdTech Magazine, the challenge is just a question of, how much of that is still relevant? Do we really want, media comparison studies from 1980 published again? Or I don't know that EdTech Magazine has many of those, but especially with works that are timeless. So things from Dewey or Goodlad or, Frera, I don't know. If we can get those works, I think that would be super exciting. So the challenges moving forward, I mean, we always have a question about sustainable growth, especially with, such a small team on our end supporting the technology side of it. And so I think one of the things that I've been thinking deeply about is how to maybe build in redundancies or distribution of expertise. I'm at least 20 years away from retirement, and I love doing this, and so this is what I want to keep doing. So I have no plans to move on to anything else or away from this to anything else. But at the same time, I recognize that, this isn't necessarily being so centric on one or two people probably isn't the best model moving forward for a lot of reasons. And so I'm interested in getting feedback and guidance from the community on how, what we might consider in that regard. Also, I think because a lot of the resources that we have been providing up to this point have been human resources. So we provide some graphic design support for covers and those kinds of things to people. We do some editing, some customization. Those aren't as readily scalable as just the technology piece of it. And so especially if we want to try to scale some of those, we might need to rethink maybe or explore new options moving forward. I do think a lot also about equity and empowerment via authorship and use. I do think a lot about who is using the site, both where they are in the world and what kinds of positions they're in, for instance. So I do have students working with me right now and doing research in this area, specifically how we can empower people, a diversity of people to use the site for publishing. So how can we, for instance, reach out and support faculty at historically Black universities and colleges, for instance, to use these kinds of to be authors in these resources and so forth. Quality assurance is always something that we need to continue to think about. We have some things built in for that, but that's something that we're constantly revising. And again, I have some students working with me on that. But then also thinking through opportunities to incentivize author generosity and show meaningful impact. I don't know exactly how to do that, but I think that moving forward, some of the things that I would like for us to do, both as a site and with my own institution, with other institutions, is figure out how to provide incentives to authors so that it's not just you receive the fuzzies for the feel-good fuzzies for all this work that you're doing, which is great, and I think is sufficient reward in and of itself. But it would be nice if we can do other things for authors as well to help incentivize this giving that so many are doing. Some other future challenges moving forward that I see on the horizon, but I'm not really ready to jump into yet, are I think moderation of content is something that is going to come up eventually, especially if you look at any social media platform, they approached the work that they're doing with a very open mindset at the beginning, but as they became more popular, then they started to see that the platform was maybe being used for things that weren't socially responsible, or that they needed to have a little bit more oversight on. I don't think that we're at that point with the platform right now, but I think that could be a possibility in the future. And so just something that I don't know how we would address that at this, but I think that it could be something that might be coming down the road. And then also just passing or sharing the torch in terms of, again, trying to get some redundancies in the work, in the services that we're providing, and distributing our expertise a little bit. Just because of full transparency, like I want to support this work and I continue to support this work, but I'm thinking like 5 or 10 years down the road, if I were asked to be serve like in an administrative position, then I wouldn't be able to provide as much support as I currently am to this. And yeah, so that's when it would make sense it would be valuable to have more people involved, or have a model in place that better supports it, that's not so centered on 1 or 2 people.